So I've been drinking a ton of Coca-Cola, like stupid amounts lately, and
like just straight Coca-Cola.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not
Not
adding anything.
Well,
to
not
it.
like diet or like
No,
Coke
regular
Zero.
Coke, regular
Okay, so-
Coke, and man, the high fructose corn syrup has got me really self-conscious. You know, like I don't want to be
Like you're getting
drinking.
fat.
No, I am getting
Like it's
slower.
just starting to
I'm getting
ring
slower, but I
around.
think that's just my age, right? And I realize, okay, if I'm getting slower, I'm
How old
aging
are
a
you?
little bit. 33. It's not that
That's
bad, right? But as
age
a
of our
soccer
Lord and
player,
Savior
I
Jesus
notice it
Christ.
maybe more than
dude.
somebody who's not as
You
active.
noticed the speed.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I remember I went from, I think I was like 32 when I joined an over 30 hockey league.
Yeah.
I was like, bro, these people are at my speed now. I was like, I went from being one of the slower players to one of the faster players as soon as I joined that. I was like, okay. But everybody was way more skilled, but it was a slower game. So it just gave you that like half a second extra
Gives
time
you an
to
edge.
do stuff. It was great.
That's how I am in soccer. We transitioned to an over 30 league, my wife and I.
Dude, you got it.
And I feel like I'm the fastest
There's a
player
lot
out there.
fewer idiots
Yeah.
in over 30 leagues too.
It's amazing how reckless some of them can be. Like some of them have a bit of an ego, and they'll come in real hot and
See,
just
that's
hit
what
you.
that's what doesn't make sense to me is like people playing at an elderly age for sports, relatively elderly, right? Over 30 for sports.
Like you're
slowing down,
You don't want to
past
hurt
your
yourself.
right?
Yeah.
And
well,
so
you have
like
a job. Most people are like, I got to go work.
I got to go to work. Yeah, I got stuff to do. I can't be doing this.
Even if it's from a desk, I can't have a knee immobilizer on while I'm sitting there all day.
That's not like so when I'm rolling with these kids at MMA or jiu-jitsu and they like just put their knee right in your solar plexus and they're just like cranking on it like, dude, I got to work in the morning. Can you please
Well,
stop?
also that is you go and you do MMA, so
Yeah.
I don't know
You're
how
gonna
bad I
get
feel
hurt.
for you.
So I'm looking for an alternative, right?
MMA is great.
To soccer?
To Coke.
Oh,
I got to bring this back in.
I got you.
This all stemmed from Coca-Cola. I got to get it out of my system because I was drinking like 3 Cokes a day, and I know there's people that may drink more than that, some that drink less, but that was way too much.
That's a
for
good
me.
solid 100. Well, there's what, like around 40 grams of sugar in a,
it's
in
like
a Coke.
36
So,
grams of
so you're
sugar,
talking like well over 100 grams of sugar just out of Coke, and that doesn't count all the other things that you.
And if you're not
potentially
burning
throw in.
it, I mean, you're just storing it. Right?
Three years ago, for a New Year's resolution, I decided not to drink soda anymore. Like the only carbonated drinks I might do like a ginger beer every
Yeah.
once in a while, like with a mixed drink. But like I don't, or I'll drink energy drinks here and there.
Well, also when you're, even if you do a Jack and Coke, you're having far less Coke than you do. You don't have a whole can of Coke and pour like 5 shots of Jack in there, So it makes it a different drink. Whereas when you're drinking it straight, it's just you're gonna finish.
I was doing the same thing though. I was drinking 3-4 sodas a day at least, and then I just stopped cold turkey, and it was really weird for like 2 weeks. I was like, what am I gonna drink? Water? Like, ugh. But then like now, if we go to Costco or whatever, you get the glizzy and the drink for $1.50, right? My even like lemonade or my wife will get Sprite or something like that. If I accidentally drink out of her Sprite instead of the lemonade, like it's like, oh my god, where's all the sugar? Like I don't know how
Head
I'm gonna
rush.
do it. I had a gluten-free Oreo last night, and
Sounds horrible.
they're actually pretty good. They're not much different.
No, they're not.
You should try it.
They're horrible.
I have one here. We'll
Oreos
try it
are just-
afterwards.
They're vegan.
Oreos,
You know what?
Oreos.
Regular Oreos
Yes, I
are
know.
vegan.
Oreos are just horrible.
And how do they make the cream?
Because
on
No,
the
no
inside?
dairy, no egg, no nothing in there. It's vegan.
It's
Yeah.
wrong. It's wrong.
Well, I had the Oreo though, and like my mouth just like lit on fire from all the sugar, and I was like, what is happening? It was weird.
So, what did you move to from the Coke when you cold turkeyed?
Just
You
water.
Went to just water.
Just water.
Yeah.
Well, you know what you could. You know what? If you because there's Bubbly makes like a couple different. They make a bubbler. Bubbly the like
Brand.
basically LaCroix kind of. They make a bubbler, which is I think 60 milligrams of caffeine, so close to a cup of coffee. Then they make another one. I can't remember exactly what but it only has like 20 or 30 milligrams of caffeine, which is less than a Coke, but there's no sugar. So you try something like that. Like if you like the little bit of caffeine that Coke provides you, minus the sugar,
That's a good
it's a
option.
good option.
Yeah. I went to tea, And that's what I'm sharing this morning with the guys.
Oh, it was a transition, son of a bitch.
You good one. Good.
That was good.
I brought masala chai to share with the guys here today. And I found I drank a lot of loose leaf tea when I was little. My parents were big on like experiencing different cultures, so we would do, we had like a small table that we would sit on pillows and make our own sushi. We'd make our own green tea from the leaves. And so for Christmas this year, I got a new teapot and a bunch of tea leaves that I can now make whatever I want. So that's what we got today is masala chai. I figured if I want to change my health and not be consuming so many of the processed sugars, this is the opposite. I mean, we've got...
Sure. And it's a lot cheaper to make.
Oh yeah, super cheap.
10 cents a cup.
It may take longer, like it's not for the impatient person. I think it generally takes me like 20 minutes to get it start to finish.
Where do you get your tea ingredients from?
Just Amazon.
From Amazon?
Yeah.
We'll post
do you try the Turkish markets?
No, I haven't been. No, we've got a lot of that around here.
We do, especially out in Dearborn. But when we were living in Detroit, we would venture out to Dearborn because that was one of the closest places in Detroit. At the time we lived there, they didn't have any big supermarkets. It was only like really small local like quickie shops downtown where we lived. So we'd have to drive out to like Allen Park or Dearborn or something like that.
He makes it sound like he lived there in 1963.
Yeah.
At the time, 4 years ago.
It was 4 years. It was 7 years ago. 8 years ago. But I mean, even just then, it wasn't that long ago, and there was still not major chain stores aside from Whole Foods, which is crazy expensive. But we would go to the Middle Eastern markets and the Turkish markets in Dearborn, and they would have some of the most amazing coffee. And it's super cheap, but I mean, the coffee's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, we started with, I bought like a sample box, came in these little tins. I think there was like 12 of them in there. And I'm such a nerd and like big on stats and information. I went through after I had a cup and I would rate the tea so I could go back later because there's so many in there.
Hey, I mean,
it's like, okay, this is like a 7 out of 10, and then I can flip them over and say, you know what, I might buy some of that later.
Yeah.
You know what we need to do? We need to do instead, they do wine testing, where you have to try the wine and you guess where it's from.
They have tea sommeliers.
Gonna do tea, what?
A tea sommelier?
Yes. That's exactly it. That's exactly
So I love it. Awesome. It's good. It's got great health benefits. It reduces hypertension, lowers your risk of type 2 diabetes, anti-inflammatory.
We know you're at risk for that when you're drinking 3 Cokes a day.
And then you can add honey to it, which is great for gut cleaning and
So anti-anxiety, anti-depression as well.
Yeah.
Pretty much every possible thing you're experiencing, just drink some tea.
Drink some tea, put some honey in it.
And it's going to at least lower your chances or take the edge off. Well, good for you for taking.
And different types of tea could benefit you different ways. Ginger's good for the gut as well.
Yep.
Some might be better for the throat.
Sometimes we cut up ginger and squeeze a lemon in there and then pour the hot water over top of it.
Yeah.
And that stuff is a powerful drink.
Yeah.
It'll get your nose, it'll get your throat, it's everything working.
I have to confess, I do still drink Cokes, but I don't start my mornings with them.
Okay.
Something about while I'm working, I need
baby steps.
I need that like that drive, and I don't get it from, and it may be just like an addiction, but I don't get it from anything other than Coke. Where like I can bury my head and just go, and all of a sudden it's 5.
Sounds like an addiction.
Maybe he's getting the old school stuff that has cocaine in it.
We can post the stuff that you buy for the tea. We can just put a link for that in the description below. So just click down there, read the description. You can find out what Tyler made. What masala chai. Don't say chai tea because it doesn't taste like chai, like what I've had traditionally as chai tea.
Yeah, well, if you want to be technical, chai means chai means tea. So if you say chai tea, you're literally saying tea. Which is,
I mean tea.
A little redundant, maybe. Yeah. So we say masala chai, right?
Chai.
That's the best way to do it. At least this is masala
chai. This is like bougie tea talk.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, welcome to Cock Talk. We are Not going to talk about tea the whole time.
No.
We'll be drinking it the whole time. Feel free to make some for yourself as you watch along. We are going to talk a lot about what's going on in the world, kind of a little bit of a newsy episode. And we want to really dive into, first, what's happening in the EU. Lots of these farmers are protesting tons of regulations that are being passed down. These are kind of culminations of things that have been pushed for several years, and they're starting to come to fruition that are really just killing farmers' profits and what they're trying to do, which we'll dive all into that. And we're also going to hit on the seemingly, I mean, it just seems like an endless amount of fires of American farms. Yeah. Cows and chickens, all these farms that are just being unfortunately destroyed, and we have no idea how it happened. Yeah. And it feels like there's a war on farmers in America. Yeah. And we're just being told, oh, well, their farm caught on fire, which, not to say that farms couldn't catch on fire, but we're going to dive into everything that's happening with that. And then we are going to close with probably, if you're like on social media somewhere, you saw this article that says that homesteaders, DIY veggie, like plant growers and chicken havers like us homesteaders, that they produce 5 times more carbon, and we're the assholes. Yeah. So we're going to dive into that. But let's first jump into the EU regulations. Tyler, I'm just going to let you kind of run with it, and then we'll just drop. I'll ask questions, and Tyler's been diving into this really deep. So let's jump into, just give an explanation of what's happening and maybe what the main regulations are that are holding farmers back.
So we have this all stemmed from some protests that popped up in France about a month ago, and then those kind of led to other eruptions of protests in Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, other areas where the farmers realize they can't survive unless they take action. So the big thing that seems to be the big deal in Europe is the European Green Deal that was brought about. Their goal in the EU is to be completely carbon neutral by 2040. Mm-hmm. And this may not impact the everyday homeowner as much as it does the farmer.
Right. Somebody who is actually, I own a farm, and they're under regulation from the EU in order to sell their products. Because if you don't know, in the EU, in order to sell things, you have to meet their regulations, or else you can't sell anything. Correct. Whether if you're in England, you can't, even selling from people across the street, you're not allowed to unless you meet EU regulations for the entire European Union.
Yeah, and it actually very restricted. It even goes.
Although Britain left the EU, so
it even goes deeper too, because depending on the city or county regulations, you may not actually be able to sell outside of your jurisdiction, essentially. Yeah. So depending on your farm size and depending on what you're selling and where you're selling, you can only sell locally grown things. You can't import things to help be able to have more things to sell to make your place more attractive at all, or draw more attention. I'm a huge fan of Jeremy Clarkson, and Clarkson Farms is
amazing.
Just an amazing.
It's such a fun show.
But he actually goes through this quite a bit, where he wanted to build his own store on his own farm of 2,000 plus acres, and they're like, no, can't do it. He's like, well, I'm gonna do it anyway. Found a way to do it, met the regulations, and then went through this whole process. And this may be TV magic, but did go through the whole process of, like, they started importing things, and they're like,
well, wasn't it something to do with the town? Like, didn't want.
It was a lot of town regulations. It was almost like an HOA of the town was just like, no, we don't want you to have it. Bring too many people. We want to keep our town quiet. But that stems more from there's a lot of statutes like that throughout the EU where you have more regulations like that.
Yeah.
And do you know the Netherlands? I remember last year in the Netherlands, the government was paying farmers to just sell them their land. I don't know if that came up in any of your research, but
I didn't see anything.
They were, because I think they were the initial country to start protesting, because the government was trying to go, hey, we'll just give you, X amount of money for your land per acre or whatever it was. They were trying to pay off farmers to create conglomerates of farming land, and the farmers actually protested last year with that, but that had nothing to do with necessarily the EU regulations.
Yeah.
But they were kind of the tip of the spear in revolting against the BS that was happening in their country.
Yeah. So let's go into the EU Green Deal a little bit. What we're seeing is the farmers are getting restricted on their land use. They're being told that they need to put 4% to the side to recover, which is honestly a good thing. But as we look into more and more of the restrictions, we're going to see that it's overall not really the best thing for the farmer. So we've got 4% of land that needs to rest to recoup. We've got a higher gas tax on the people that are going to continue to use diesel. So farm equipment is like strictly diesel.
It has to be because it requires so much power. You can't use regular gasoline for it.
So they're stuck. They cannot use electric. You cannot convert a farm into electric farm equipment.
Not without a ton of money. They do have
ridiculous amounts of money.
And the infrastructure you would need on the farm itself to be able to power and charge those electric.
Right. Yeah. Ridiculous.
Yep. Warehouses.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got that. There's a reduction in pesticides and herbicides, anything that may kill something that's attacking the crops. So they want them to essentially use less efficient equipment, protect their crops less, and have less land to farm on. So all these combined are giving the farmers way less income than they could survive on.
And their transportation costs are increasing too.
Exactly,
right?
to get the stuff in and out.
Yeah.
So they literally will not be able to survive with these new restrictions. And there definitely needs to be something done to maybe make them more efficient, but forcing this on the farmers, making them have to pay fines for this type of thing, they're going to just crumble.
Well, that's what their point is.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole reason they want these farmers to crumble, because then they can come in, a bigger company can scoop them up, and they can do what they want to do. Although, do we see it as a bad thing that they can't use certain pesticides and herbicides? That
No, not at all.
There are things in the U. I mean, we use Roundup on frickin' everything, glyphosate, and it's horrible for you.
Yeah.
And most of that actually is already banned in Europe.
Yeah.
They're trying to ban even more stuff. I don't know that the problem is the regulation. The problem is going to somebody and saying, hey, here's how you've done it for the last however long. We need you to stop. Okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
We just need you to stop, or we're going to fine you. And you're like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I don't have a solution. And in order to get to a place where you want to not use the same amount of pesticides on your crops, well, you got to change your whole infrastructure. Oh, who's going to pay me to do that? Like, it's not fair. I've been operating under these rules for so long. And yeah, I mean, they've given these farmers, let's say 10 years to switch over. That's not very long when you consider a business that is at such a huge scale to go, hey, in 10 years, you got to basically switch your whole processes.
Well, and not only that, but on top of the processes, the equipment itself, like we talked about, like you can't just go pour gasoline in a diesel vehicle. That's not how that works. So even if you can once, you do anything one time, but to switch over all of that equipment, let's say you did have the infrastructure, let's say you did have the power on site on the farm to be able to switch over to electric vehicles, electric farm equipment. Electric farm equipment is going to cost way more than diesel, because
you're just better off paying the taxes. Probably.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you're going to spend easy $2 to $3 million on farm equipment that's needed in order, like brand new farm equipment.
Sure.
Oh, way more than that.
Because
depending on the size of the farm.
Yeah,
right.
I
mean, a tractor itself will easily cost you $300,000 for a diesel tractor at that scale. Let's say you have 500 or 1,000 acres that you're farming, you're going to need something that's big enough. That's easy, $250,000, $350,000. That's if it's diesel. If it's electric, we see electric prices are way higher than any diesel or gasoline vehicle. So you're probably going to spend another 10 to 20% on top of that,
and
if
then
not
what
more.
happens when your battery dies?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
then
your
you
battery
can't farm.
probably costs $100,000 in those things.
Oh my gosh.
And then you can't farm, then you can't harvest, then you can't cultivate, then you're losing out even more money, and food production goes down.
So then who's gonna pay? It's gonna be people like us, the regular person who the prices are going to have to go up because the farmer is going to go, well, the only way for me to do this is for me to raise my prices.
Exactly.
And then we're sitting here going, well, but I just want my $15 an hour minimum wage. And suddenly that's nothing because everything is going up all over the place. And then your $100,000 a year job is nothing because everything keeps on going up. And this is where it starts. Now, I think that that's what our listeners need to remember is that almost all of inflation to me starts with food. Because as soon as food is more expensive, then everything else is going to become more expensive. Because then your transportation costs invariably are going up. That's making the food more expensive. Like everything is going to affect every aspect of your freaking life. And nobody even knows about this thing. Nobody even knows that this is going on. That's what blows my mind. And you go, well, somebody needs to produce some carbon. Some things are going to just produce energy. We need to burn energy to make energy. We know that. So what do we want it to be? Do we want it to be this factory? Do we want it to be food production? I mean, I'll take food production all day. That should be the one that isn't limited, and then limit all the other things that are, creating whole bunch of plastic bullshit that we don't need.
I think something too that is often overlooked is humans are not the major contributor of carbon. Catastrophic events like volcanoes erupting puts way more carbon. And I don't know the stats on it, but I know I've seen videos and maybe if Joel's feeling adventurous, he can find something on the carbon emissions of a volcano eruption, but they're insane.
Well, it's almost like climate change has been occurring for all of Earth's existence.
Yeah, up and down.
Yeah, temperature change. We've seen temperature changes 2-3 degrees throughout.
Yeah.
I mean, and in recorded history, not just like, we guess that it changed. This is like within the last 1,000 years where we can measure, we have legitimate records of weather patterns. And this has happened before. I mean, it's all about money. When you look at it, it's all taxes. How do we get the government bigger? All this is making the government bigger. Whether this is in the EU, and similar things are happening here in the US, where a carbon tax is consistently talked about, especially on the left, that a carbon tax needs to happen. It already happens with our gas because you get taxed to be on the road. Like you get, hey, the more gas you put in your car, you are paying a carbon tax because you're using gas. Therefore, you're paying more taxes to the roads, and it's all just a way to get the government money. It's all just, we're gonna.
Well, it's their job is to funnel as much as they can in order to fund.
Is it though? Is that their job?
I'm not saying I agree with it, right? But it's literally their job.
That's their job they've given themselves.
They have made it their mission. I don't necessarily
agree with that. I believe in small government, but so an interesting thing about that is government trying to tax and decide where to put all this money is the U.S. and its role in this European issue that we have. You look at a country like Poland. Poland's biggest issue, maybe not the Green Deal, but cheap imports. We've got a Ukraine war going on, and the Ukraine agricultural sector has been devastated by the war from Russia. And in order to help Ukraine, the U.S. has given, at this point, what I've read is $250 million just to the agricultural sector. And what this is doing is they're giving money out to the different farms, and this is allowing the farmers to then sell their grain, whatever they're growing, much cheaper than they typically would. And you look at a country like Poland, their domestic grain now costs more than if they brought it in from Poland.
From Ukraine.
From Ukraine.
As an import as opposed
to... our actions here in the U.S. are affecting the world economy on the other side of the world and contributing to these riots, these protests.
But we have no money for the border.
Yeah.
Well, I think even too, with the bill that just passed yesterday, there's another $60 billion that's going to Ukraine, and that's not including the
going to Israel,
15 going to Israel, and then there's another, whatever. But inside of that, I think there's another 100 million, if I read correctly, another 100 million that's going to the agricultural sector, like you just said. So a total of 350 million.
But it's a border bill.
Yeah.
It's madness. It's absolute madness that you can pass a bill and call it a border bill and it not even be a large percentage of the bill.
Right.
It's like this tiny little
It's a keyword focus on
it's still
what we
billions, but it's this tiny little portion, and it's just their way of getting money over to Ukraine. It is a Ponzi scheme. They're like, it's we'll help you with this. We just need a little money for this over here, and it's a ton of more money. It is absolutely insanity, and people are just, oh, it's fine. Oh, what do I do? I don't. They're. What do you do?
It's hard to know what you can do from your house. Like in reality, we don't have a lot of power alone, and that's
in reality,
how we feel.
You got to be prepared.
Yeah,
that's what we're here for.
You need organization, right?
Yeah.
I think this is a good stopping point.
Yeah, let's take a quick break and then
take a quick break,
we'll come
and
back.
then we'll just jump back into farms and burning down.
Let's touch on the U.S.
And the U.S. All right, sounds good. Okay, welcome back. Cock Talk here, second half. We are going to dive into things happening in the U.S. right now in farms. DeMitt, Texas, huge fire, but there's also been 500,000 livestock animals have died since 2020 in fires, which is crazy to think about.
That was a year. 1 year.
Oh, in a year.
In
2020.
In 2020. Yeah. And obviously there's been more since then, and there's just been tons of farms that have lit on fire. And that isn't necessarily, it doesn't mean that there's a arson on every single one of them or a conspiracy. Obviously farms light on fire. There's a lot of old barns, horrible wiring. We've never seen horrible wiring before. But there was a massive fire recently in Divot, Texas, and I want Tyler to tell the story.
So it was a year ago. Last April was the big fire. There was actually a smaller fire in January at the same farm. But let's go into the April one first. The April one, they have this is a massive cattle farm. They have tens of thousands of cattle. They've grown enormous, and they are extremely efficient. They have the most expensive equipment. They literally have these giant platforms that rotate, and by the time the cow gets around the whole platform, it's done being milked, and they just have these things stacked up. Super efficient, right?
Sounds like a great life.
And because they have so many cows, they have so much shit, literally. And what are you gonna do with this shit? So they pump these out with these special trucks. They suck them up, these vacuum trucks, and they pour them in a lagoon that they create. And their goal is to eventually get these biogas digesters that will take this manure and turn it into natural energy, so that the farmers have, they're literally making money from shit. It's a little bit
or
of a
sell
recoup.
your compost or whatever you have. Yeah.
Exactly, but the goal of it is to supplement their income a little bit by making use of all this shit, because there is a massive amount of it on these farms.
I know how much shit I get from 40-ish chickens, so I can only imagine 18,000 cows.
Yeah, they truck out all day with this stuff, and what the issue is,
cow is pooping every 3.3 seconds.
they've got these trucks from Mensch. It's a company that makes these vacuums, and there is surprisingly no regulation on them. So there's nothing in the U.S. There's nothing in the country where they're made. Nothing is regulating them. So they kind of have a pass through the market, and they have such a small clientele that maybe the government didn't think it was going to be a big issue, but it definitely became a big issue on this farm. So what we see
do you know how many trucks they have on the farm?
I don't know.
Okay.
The research that I said didn't say. Okay. What I do know is that in January, they had one of these trucks light on fire at the lagoon. Okay.
So it's dumping shit into the shit.
So
yeah. Okay.
Here's the conspiracy here. Yeah. Here's the conspiracy here. We have a truck with no regulation that's being used on a farm that has a lot of value to the country. Okay, and its first fire is at a lagoon of shit where there's nothing to lose. But we get a prime example of what could happen if maybe this were in a more important area. Okay, so this didn't really get a lot of coverage. They parked the truck, they took the tires off and left it. If I'm owning a truck and my shit lights on fire, both literally and figuratively here. I want to know what caused it, and I'm going to be really skeptical of that brand. I'm going to want, stuff looked at.
It's like when an airplane crashes, all that model's airplanes, they take them right out.
Exactly.
Because they need to figure out what happened, make sure that it's not going to happen again, right?
Spoiler, that did not happen. They parked it.
Shocked.
They weren't worried about it at all.
Yeah.
And 4 months later, in April, they had not the exact same truck, but the same model in the house with all of the cows ignite and burned. I mean, they had so much loss. They burned
18,000 cows.
Yeah.
So it killed 18,000 cows,
and not even right away.
That
being
isn't all their cows?
They're getting burned. They're getting suffocated. This is a massive multi-million-dollar loss.
A lot of well done burgers.
I'm going to get some.
Yeah.
Send the dogs in there.
And so, there was an investigation by the fire department. Nothing seems malicious. But it was the same truck driver that was in the one that lit on fire in the lagoon.
The same driver.
The same driver was in both fires, which is a little weird. But also the fact that we have it in a safe zone and then maybe a practice run. Not saying that's what happened, but there's something weird there. And then we have the full-fledged accident that just literally...
At very least, you have a very flammable situation that isn't regulated. And because of that, there's massive loss to tons of cows, which directly affects you at home because the cost of meat is going to, that's going to affect it. Not that there's hundreds of thousands of livestock and so it's not as if that individual event is going to make your meat go up double the price or anything, your steaks. But when one thing happens, you always want to keep your eye out because you never know, it could happen again. And there's other farms using the same things, right? Fortunately, we're not using vacuum shit things on our homestead. We don't really need that. Although now I have a really good use for my old vacuum cleaner. I think I might take that into the coop.
From liquid bidding.
Yes, liquid bidding. Perfect. Yeah, liquid bidding is our sponsor.
This is a kind of an insight into an overall potential issue. Is as farms get larger and larger, and we have a single source farm, right, for a single source product, and that is very large, and then we have a catastrophic event that affects. Like you were just saying, it affects the pricing of beef. It'd be the same if it was vegetables, if it was fruits, and all these different things. So really, what we can do as individuals is be able to produce, or as America, we should be producing on a lot more farms and smaller farms. So that way it's a lot more spread. It's not like a conglomerate.
Not according to the University of Michigan, which may be transitional.
Exactly.
We can keep on coming back to it. But there was a study done by the University of Michigan, which the headline does say, 5 times more carbon emissions from smaller farms, from homesteaders, which is, it's certainly... Everyone's making their headlines so you click on the article to actually read it, which most people don't actually do. They just go ahead and skip ahead. But this article, this study, does ultimately say that, hey, people that do this on their own, that do it at small scale, it's inefficient. And the bigger guys do it more efficiently. They produce less carbon. Whether that means anything or you give a shit, which I don't, I'm happy to produce more carbon if it means that my family gets the food that we want and the chickens and all that. But regardless, it's not necessarily saying don't do this, but explain how this all ties in together with what we're talking about, how we want farms to be efficient, but at the same time we've got these little guys. Like, I don't have the money to be that efficient.
No, and I don't think you should. No. I think the big takeaway that I learned after reading the article, I had some hasty conclusions after seeing the title, right?
Sure.
But when I actually clicked on it, it's really good data. And the basis of the data is that, as Mark said, a large farm that produces, hundreds, thousands of acres of corn is going to be much more efficient than 500 little tiny farms, because each little tiny farm is going to have to build their own little small structure. They're going to have to bring in their own fertilizer that is, typically from the box store. So it's going to cost more. There's more plastic packaging that's involved with that, and so
there's more people probably to till that small area of land, because you've got, let's say, one person is tilling that, and there's 500 farms like that, and that's 500 people. Whereas with a more efficient machine, you could do all that acreage with just a few people.
Oh yeah,
and some big ass machines. But
so their main point was, and they're not demonizing the small farm in the article. They're saying grow tomatoes at home, because tomatoes have to be flown in, and their carbon footprint for tomatoes, I mean, we're talking not that much difference, but if you grow them at home, then they don't need to be flown in.
Right.
Same thing with asparagus. They give those two examples. Is if you're growing those two, then actually your farm is more efficient. If you're growing something,
well, and they're perennials, so you could just keep on getting them over and over.
And everybody that I know that grows tomatoes gets thousands of them.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it just goes crazy.
And the asparagus, I'll tell you what, if you plant asparagus, if you want to plant one thing this year, you're just like, I don't know what to plant, go plant some asparagus somewhere. Doesn't even matter. That stuff grows like a weed. But it'll grow up, and you'll see the little asparagus, and then you just don't touch it. It'll turn into this actually really pretty looking fern, and then it'll just start popping up more and more. And in like 3 years, you're going to have a ton of asparagus. And asparagus isn't always cheap.
Right.
You can get your own asparagus, and you don't need to spray anything on it. Nothing will eat it. Nothing really touches it. It's super easy to grow, and it just keeps coming back every year.
I know most humans that won't eat it.
More and more and more. It makes your pee smell funny. I actually, this is a I guess my guilty confession is that when I eat asparagus and I go pee afterwards, I actually am like, yeah, I eat asparagus. I like this. It's not like I'm getting off on the smell or anything, but I like the smell of it. I think it's interesting, like, oh, cool, my pee smells like asparagus.
You're going to be labeled as...
It's called asparagic acid is what...
It's my little treat for eating healthy.
Did you know that? Right. And then the next person that walks in there goes, whoa, somebody had asparagus.
Right.
Do you know that only 75% of people can smell asparagic acid?
So there are people that can't. One out of four people.
Some people say yes. So some people they initially thought that not everybody's pee smells, but it turns out that not everybody has the gene to smell it.
Oh, that's
so there's some people that just don't smell the acid.
Well, I'm not one of those people.
Yeah,
me neither.
Unfortunately.
So
we're the three of three.
So the real article really pushes, if you're going to do it at home, then you can do it better, and I think, and honestly, to each their own in this matter. But if you're really concerned about the carbon footprint, which I don't think any of us really are, if you plant some trees, you're going to offset that carbon dioxide that you're producing. But
I think even take it a step farther is my argument would be, regardless of what you're growing, whether or not that produce or that fruit has any sort of large carbon footprint for that specific one, that if you're doing it at home and a bunch of people decide, hey, we're all going to start growing, like we had victory gardens back in World War I and World War II where everybody was growing their own stuff. You do that specifically to offset transportation and logistics costs, which are inevitably going to be less CO2 and emissions going.
Well, and that's just less money, right? Like you don't have to spend money on transportation costs. Great, you could charge less.
Yeah,
you could, if you're just trading and maybe selling to your neighbors, you're not as worried about, well, I have to transport this to the farmer's market even, or like I have to buy a spot in the farmer's market to be able to do that. Like it's a lot cheaper if you can do it yourself, which is hard to do. I mean, there's time involved with that, but and I think taking this back to the fires and the potential for these huge farms for things to go wrong because not everything's as regulated as maybe it needs to be. Sorry, I feel like freaking Joe Biden in the debate. There's a fly on my face. My garden is likely not going to just light on fire. Like I've got that up on a big ass farm. Like I don't have the infrastructure where I'm worried about my stuff.
You're not using massive diesel engines,
Well, I mean. Yes, I'm using a diesel engine, but it is as like a small tractor. Yeah, like a little subcompact tractor. We're not talking
about an unregulated,
a vacuum shit sucker.
Right.
But like, I mean, The most likely scenario for a fire is like, okay, you have a shed back here, and you have a light in there. I suppose the light could catch on fire. So unlikely.
Yeah.
Like, very unlikely. Maybe a heat lamp.
There's a heat lamp that falls into the hay, then the likelihood is a lot higher. But just don't do that.
But I think this is really about construction. Is what I would want to get into. Is if you are taking the time to actually do your farm right, to have good construction that's not going to fall apart.
And plan ahead.
3 years. Yeah, plan ahead.
Yeah.
Run your wiring correctly. There's no real danger in that happening. If you're doing it properly and you're planning to do it properly.
Right.
If you're going to just haphazardly throw your stuff together, maybe you're on a budget, start maybe a little bit smaller scale. And then once you can save up and build something, a solid structure that is going to last, then those events are less likely to happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that also goes into like, knowing how to build things yourself makes it a lot cheaper. Like you can go and you can buy a $5,000 shed, but you could also build a shed yourself for 2 or 3. Like,
are you building a bigger shed this year?
I want to.
Yeah,
I actually want to build. I want to build a shed for things to put in, but I also want to build like a little auxiliary office somewhere in the woods, like a little cabin office thing. So that's on the that's probably
with the chickens.
See,
It's coworkers.
right? Come on in, guys. We got to collaborate in here.
Come on in here, mother.
That's a lot of female coworkers. You'd have great diversity numbers.
It's like when I worked at IKEA in college. Oh my gosh, I think it was me and this other guy, and there were 28 women in our department. So it was 2 men, 28 women. They'd be like, all right, mandatory staff meeting. You go in and you're like, all right, I'm ready for the gossip. Here we go.
Mandatory staff meeting or woman-datory staff meeting?
I don't even know what to do with that. But yes, back to your homestead. You do need to do things efficiently because it's going to cost you money. Like let's just take it back to carbon emissions aside, all that. You don't want to not plan ahead. Like if you're planning on doing something, at least map it out. You don't have to do everything all in 1 year or even in like 1 decade. Maybe you plan it out for like, here's what I'd love to have in the next 20 years. Well, you're going to start with this little tiny spot, but if you don't plan it out, you might have to tear that building down in order to do something else. Mm-hmm. So be efficient with where you put it and how maybe in the future you're going to design some traveling roads around your spot. Granted, you're not doing that if you've got a little half acre or something, but I've got 5. I'm thinking through, what do I want to do long term? I don't want to knock down trees to then go, oh shoot, I could have used those trees as a little barrier and I could have done it over here.
I think it would be interesting to go into maybe at a different podcast, an expectation for what it would cost to start something. Like if you're looking at this podcast thinking, I really want a homestead, but I don't know what even I should attempt, where I should even start with this thing. I think we should really go into at some point startup costs. Like I think my duck enclosure, I've got 3 ducks now. It costs maybe with the pen and the house like $400 or $500 total. And I hope to breed my ducks and get more egg layers and essentially be kind of self-sufficient, at least with eggs. And the girls love it. It's a great family tool, to teach them responsibility.
Tyler has daughters. He doesn't have a harem, just in case you were wondering.
I think it's amazing, right? And I think everybody should be willing to put in a little bit of effort.
And you didn't have that before, and you got some ducks. You got them for a birthday party.
Yeah.
He says to me, hey, can I buy these ducks? And I'll just give them to you when our birthday party's over and you can have the ducks. I said, yeah, sure. And then it was like, I don't really want to give them away. I love them too much. And now you have a bunch of ducks. I think I got like half of them, but you got a bunch
more
of
than
ducks.
Half. Yeah, I bought 16 and it all started with my wife wanting, my 2-year-old loves ducks. Paper ducks, rubber ducks, cartoon ducks, you name it. She sees a duck, she was yelling at it and pointing. She was so excited. And my wife just kind of flippantly was like, wouldn't it be cool if we had like a duck party and we got little ducklings? And I was like, done. And they're so cheap. I got 16 for like $95 shipped to my house.
Yeah, that's what you don't know. You don't know they come in a little box.
They do. They come alive one
Holes
day.
in the top, of course.
1 day old, and they are the darn cutest things.
You can do the same with chickens. You can
and
do the
so-
same with pretty much every
Yeah.
fowl. You can get like little guineas in a little box, and they send them to you.
So we lost one. Just that happens, right? It's if you have livestock, you're going to have dead stock. So we lost one. It came actually with a broken leg, and we called several duck farms around in the area, and all of them were like, "Just put it down. It's not going to have a life. That duck is meant to be big and fat and can't fly, and if it can't move its legs, it's going to sit there in the mud." Just put it out of its misery. So we lost one. We kept 4. So you took 11, and I think maybe some raccoons or a fox got into some.
Got
of
a
them.
couple of them, yeah. And then you took some back.
Yeah,
I think now I have 6 that are still alive from
That's good.
that
That's
batch, and I have 1 left over. I got Muscovies that are like these weird looking ducks, and they have these nasty jowls. But yeah, I have 1 left. I think I got 8, and not like. Most of them got eaten by things. Mm-hmm. Ducks are hard because ducks want to be, they like a shelter, but they don't want to be confined. Mm-hmm. But now my ducks will go into the chicken coop. They all just they walk in the door and the door closes. This is like a little automatic door. So yeah, they like it in there now. Oh, they're good. But yes, I agree. Startup cost is important.
Yeah. We'll go into
going
that.
back to that. Just that it's good to know what it costs, but also you knew how to build it, and you did your thing, and you weren't really worried about, if it costs a couple extra $100 to get something nice and good, you're good. You can definitely start cheaper if you want to build something. I mean, I got 2 dog houses that I use for some chicken things. I got 2 dog houses for $20 each, beautifully built by a high school woodshop class. They were like, "Hey, we have some extras. Could you just give us like $20?" My friend worked at high school. Like, you can scrounge for things that people just don't want.
Right.
Facebook Marketplace. You could do that. If you don't want to do that or don't need to, you can spend a little bit more, but you definitely can go cheap.
I would even argue that you could probably contact a high school with a wood shop and say like, "Hey, I would like to buy one of these, and I want to support your wood shop class. I'll buy the materials if your class can put them together." And you have the wood shop teacher that's overseeing everything, making sure it's done right, and then just let them have a project, let them learn a trade, while you get something of good quality out of it for super cheap.
Yeah. And
I think honestly, the students would love to see it being used too. Like when you make something, you don't want to just be like, "Oh,
you don't want it to go in the trash."
And trash and honestly, it could be a fun field trip too. Like, if we go and we deliver it to the house, we can see the animals like use it right then and there. And there's so much more pride that goes into your work, that you're teaching these kids to be, self-sufficient, learn how to build all on their own, and they get to see the benefit of it.
Well, they sold those dog houses for like $300 or $400, but I got the last few scraps. It was like, I'll take them. They're like roofed at like shingles and everything. They're nice. Amazing. And apparently this year they're making chicken coops, so I'm gonna find out about those.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, let's wrap up. Any final thoughts before we do that? Like homesteading, about what we've already talked about, what we've covered. Anything else that you want to tell our listeners?
I think the real point of this whole talk is about the government versus the regular man. All these topics that we talked about today are the government. It appears to be either squeezing, for more taxes. If they're restricting farmers in the EU from using their regular equipment so that they can make more money, bring in more, or maybe they're trying to run them out of town. So
or who's pushing the taxes? It's the people who have the money to lobby them to push the taxes, which could be a bigger farm who wants their land. And,
exactly.
Yeah.
Or we've got something like the homesteading article that maybe the government wants, and I definitely believe this is true. I shouldn't say maybe, but the government wants us to rely on them for everything. And if we're not reading the article and we see that title, we immediately jump to, this is the government trying to take away and fearmonger us. And I think that's the goal.
Well, and we basically live in this society where the government is controlled by big business. So the big business is just government's the arm of big business, not the other way around.
Correct.
So big business goes, well, we're losing money to these fuckers that are growing their own food in their backyard, damn it. And so then they start to figure out a way to tax you and to make it harder to do what you want to do and to buy feed. We didn't even get to like the potential of feed causing your egg layers to stop laying and all that. We'll get to that on another show. But yes, so many little aspects of why bigger corporations may not want you to do this. But that's exactly why you should do this. 100% why you should do this.
Because there absolutely could be a time that comes when there is a huge food restriction or a shortage of certain things. We saw it in, again, with the Victory Garden stuff, we saw it in World War I and World War II, where there was actually rations of the amount of food that you could buy from a local market.
Great Depression,
Exactly. So if that ever happens, you have to supplement your own food. And guess what? If you haven't started something and you're not growing anything and that happens, you're shit out of luck.
Don't even think about coming here.
Those seeds are going to be gone. Those shelves are going to be out of stock. Everybody that could be...
Even if you do have access to it, it's going to take weeks, months to grow.
Yeah.
You don't just all of a sudden go grab a seed and then, hey, I've got asparagus in a week.
Oh, and you have to know how to do it.
So, exactly.
I think the hard part here is where we live, we have a climate that changes.
Winter.
And ultimately we can grow in the spring and summer and maybe a little bit of part of fall, but in winter, what do we do?
You can basically grow lettuce under your little cover. But that's, you're right. What do you do?
At least we can be self-sufficient for 3/4 of the year, but we've got to have.
But that's where you eat meat,
and you properly store foods like doing lime pickling for eggs and being able to store eggs. Like for us, I knew that this winter all of our chickens are going to stop laying, so I've got 9 dozen eggs downstairs in glass jars. Awesome. So if we ever run short, which luckily we haven't yet, I've got 9 dozen eggs that will last me up to 2 years in that lime pickling juice.
We'll have to do an episode where we pickle some things.
Yeah,
that'd be fun. I think another interesting thing that we can do as a homesteading culture is finding people that have what you don't have. For example, me and Joel, he grows far more eggs. Gets more, I guess he doesn't grow them, but his chickens lay far more eggs than my ducks lay. Right. And we go through eggs like nobody's business. But my wife makes sourdough bread, and his wife doesn't make sourdough bread. So we have a little bit of a trade deal going on where I give him a loaf of bread, he gives me a dozen eggs, and we're supporting each other. And he doesn't need to make the sourdough and keep the starter going and do the chickens, right? Yeah. So finding people, a community that can all kind of assist and trade, essentially barter and trade the different crops.
Yeah, there's no taxes on trading things either.
No, there's no sale that's involved, and so there's no government, trying to get their piece of the pie.
And you know where it's coming from.
Exactly.
Like if Mark, if you've got your fruit forest and I've got vegetables I'm growing and we trade, I know you didn't spray a bunch of Roundup and glyphosate all over your stuff, and you know the same with mine.
Dude, funny story. My neighbor, guy a few doors down, he sprays his grass with Roundup, and the neighbor next door to him is suing him. He took him to court because they grow organic vegetables and they're suing them for getting Roundup on their vegetables.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yes, I love and they're bitching to the neighbors. These people are suing us. Blah blah blah. They're assholes. I'm like, no, you're the asshole.
I'm on their side.
Yeah, I'm on their side. I hope you. They're like, we're gonna move. I was like, good riddance.
See ya.
When you put your house up for sale, let me know. Maybe I'll buy it. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today.
Yeah.
This has been Cock Talk. Find us on, Instagram and TikTok. We're Cock Talk the podcast. You can find us on there. All the links, all the places to find us are below in the description. Subscribe to the show. You don't want to miss anything.
Officially on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. So wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you want to watch, watch us on YouTube as well. It's all there.
Beautiful. Love it. Gentlemen, good work. And to our listeners, thanks for listening, and we'll see you for the next episode.
See you. Thank you.